Hi, welcome to Don's Manufactory. Well, as you can see, I'm not dressed for work, but hey, I decided to shoot an intro for this video. I didn't do it on the last one. I guess I'm just getting lazy. It's getting to be 100 degrees here in Oregon, so I'm just kind of like motoring through. Anyway, today I will be fixing up the brakes and the axles, new wheel cylinders. The backing plates are kind of worn. I mean, they're excessively worn, I'm going to say. And so I've decided I'm going to weld them up. So that's the first thing on the list. Let's get at it. Now that I've got it all cleaned up, you can see how worn this backing plate is. You can see how deep that is. I can easily catch a brake shoe and make it not actuate or return properly. So that one there, that one there. There's just a little bit of problem with that one, but not bad. So those I'll kind of let go, but one, two, at least three of these I'm going to weld up. Using the TIG welder here, no sooner do I touch the welder down that it burns a hole straight through, because the grooves in the backing plate are so deep there's almost no metal left. Boy, that would have been a nice failure if that had gone all the way through. Using a body dolly, the flat surface, I just stuck some 220 sandpaper to it, and then I'm hand machining the final surface of those pads where the shoes rest. You know, it's important that they're flat and in really good shape. There you go. And then after that, it's just cleaning it up for paint. I get the one done, and then it's time to move on to the second. And here we go. Same thing, only this one, I cleaned it up first, and then I welded it. I can't stick to the same procedure no matter what. It was pretty gooey, cleaned up pretty well. There was some rust, so I had to treat it with Ospo. And then I primed everything and painted it. It turned out pretty well. I even, on one of these, I think it was this one, the second one here, I welded the upper pin or stop, whatever you call that part at the top that the shoe actually puts its pressure against when it's activated. Okay, welding up backing plate number 2. Same thing. See, oh yeah, see, there I am. I'm welding the pin. Okay, so it was the second one. And there they are, all primed and painted. Look brand new. Okay, working on the axles. I was going to put everything back together this morning, but this bearing here is missing 30 thousandths of width. So it doesn't, the retainer can't hold the bearing tight in the axle. It has end play. Not good. Can't have the axle flopping around. Besides that, this is not a Mustang retainer here. So it doesn't have the passage for oil, if it leaks out of the bearing here, to not soak the brakes. Here, and I'll show you what I mean. Here is a spare axle I've got. It's bent, but it actually has a decent bearing on it. But that's what the retainer looks like. It's got this passage for grease to go down through here. There's a hole in the backing plate and a gap at the back where the rear gasket is, and it allows any grease that might get through here or come out of this bearing to find its way out of the backing plate without getting on the brake shoes. So I do have new bearings for this, so I'm going to go ahead and replace this bearing, cut all this off, and take this retainer off and clean up and use this proper retainer here with a new bearing. And I guess I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty destructive. So I just take a chisel. It's sharp, but it's blunt. And I just beat into the retainer until it stretches it. It actually stretches it apart, and then the retainer gets loose. Okay, so I grab this axle, I start chiseling on it, and guess what? It's a hardened retainer. So switching to plan B, get out the die grinder and start cutting stuff off. Just grind that bearing and give it a whack with a hammer. Any way you can get the bearing apart, you can beat the seals out of it and take the ball retainer out, or just grind it like I did, but get that off the outside, and then you can cut the inside and grind that off too. Okay, the next step is to take the die grinder and grind a groove in the race, the inner race. Being careful not to grind through to the axle, of course. I kind of grind it so it's got a 45-degree angle, so it's not too hard on the chisel. And then when I put the chisel in there, it just cracks it. And lo and behold, once it's cracked, then it's loose. And it just kind of comes right off of there. I'm trying to do this with one hand, but you get the idea. I'm using the old race as a protector so that I can drive it with this piece of water pipe. The whole point is not to damage anything. Just like that, it's on. Okay, now for the retaining ring. Same story. It would help if I had a longer piece of pipe so it had a little more weight to it. But, I don't know, seems to be working fine. So yes, I'm using the old race as a driver again, and I'm driving that retainer ring on. This one seemed to be hardened like the other one that I took off. Just like that. And there it is. The bearing with the proper retainer is now on here and ready to be installed. I assembled the passenger side only to find out that the bearing was loose in the housing. So I ended up ruining one of these gaskets, so now I'm just going to make a new one. All I'm doing is just tracing around this gasket. Yeah, it was, I could have made them all, I guess. I just decided that for $1.29 I would buy one. It's too bad I ruined it, and I ended up making them anyway. So I'm taking the line on the inside cut and leaving it on the outside cut. This gasket here that has a cutaway for the drain hole. So I guess I'll try that. I'll put both of these gaskets on and we'll see if the bearing tightens up. If it does, then I'm good. If it doesn't, I'll have to take that gasket out. But it really needs to be there. Otherwise, the drain hole doesn't work. So the thing I'm worried about here is the gasket material I was using was thicker than the original gaskets that I bought. So would it cause an end play problem again? So you'll also notice that I put grease on the part of the axle where the seal runs, because we don't want that running dry. You ever have one of those days where your fingers are kind of all cafarbly, fumbly, and you can't seem to get things done? Well, that's the way this day was going. It was about 95 in the shop, and I was having a heck of a time keeping going. Okay, let's get her cranked up to, what is it, 25? There's 20 right there. Oh, it's kind of close. I probably had it up to... Uh-oh. This bolt's gonna go. Yep. One of the bolts is bad. Is it the nut that's pulling? Yep. Bolt is still okay, but the nut just, the thread's pulled right out of the nut. Well, gonna have to do something about that. Wow, bad nut. That's really weird. I don't think I've ever had one of those fail. Yeah, I had spare nuts. I had nuts in my drawer that I guess some people would call that a junk drawer, but it's where all my spare nuts and bolts go. Okay, that is that. And the axle is nice and tight. First and foremost is I got to get this through the backing plate, the emergency brake, and then get it hooked up to the shoe. And then what I do is I just take the wire cutters and let's see if I can do this without another pair of pliers. I normally have to have a second set so I can, oh no, I'm gonna make it. See, and then I just hold the cable like that, hold the spring back, and then you just put it on like that and let go of the spring, and it's there. Applying anti-seize to the support pads and around the pin at the top too there eventually. And now you get to see just how klutzy I am trying to put this in. You see, how did this go? Trying to figure it out. I have other ways that I do this where it's easier. Normally I put the spring and the adjuster and all that at the bottom, and then I can just sort of snap the shoes into place. But for the life of me, I could not get that to work this time. Pieces just kept falling apart and falling out, and like you see right there, the shoe just snaps out of position. So finally I just give up and I do it one piece at a time, and I can get it in first. Also, it's best to think of these brake systems as front to rear rather than what's on the left or the right. The way the brakes are set up, there's front springs, there's rear springs, there's front shoes, there's rear shoes. And if you do it like that, you won't make mistakes when you move from side to side. And it's also a good idea to leave one side together when you have the other side apart. Well, that is like just about perfect, I'd say. Washed it down with brake clean. Now I'm just going to take some 120 grit sandpaper and just stuff up the shoes. I'll spare you some of the noise here. So that gives it a good, give it a good fresh face. And I will do the same thing to the drum here. Just give it a little bit of a sanding job. Boy, I concentrated on the rusty edge so much I didn't even get the middle. Now we'll wipe her out again.
Okay, so yeah, I just scuffed it up a little bit. Take the rusty edge off, see, so it won't interfere with the shoes. And then put it on and we're good. All I gotta do is do that on the other side. Well, that wraps up the video for today. Yes, I did clean those brake shoes before I final assembled the rear. Driver's side went together relatively easy. It's amazing how much I'd forgotten and how fumbly I was trying to get that passenger side together. Yikes. Let's see. I have bled the brakes, and let me show you the tool I was using. So here's my preferred method of bleeding when I'm by myself. Yeah, I could use a power bleeder or something, but those are typically messy. This works really good. It's just got a hose with a really tight fitting for the bleeder right here. And it has a check valve right here in a container. So you just put this on the bleeder, open it up, and then I pump the brakes with my hand. I put a light down behind this hose so I can see the bubbles as they come through. And so I pump it with my hand so that I can watch any of the wheels, and that's pretty much it. It works pretty good. Oh, and when you're using this, it's a good idea to take the bleeder out and clean it, and then put some like wheel bearing grease on the threads of the bleeder, so that when you screw it in, when you're pumping the brakes, what I don't want to have happen is when I let the pedal up, I don't want it sucking air back into the system, because then you're pumping and you get a continuous trail of bubbles, because every time you let up the pedal, it's sucking in just a little bit of air around the bleeder. So it's best if you put grease on those threads so that that doesn't happen, and the only air bubbles you see are the ones coming out of the system. I gotta tell you, it's great because Betsy's got brakes now. Gosh, it's getting close. I want to drive it. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.